Hello, I'm Dilek Tunan. You're watching A News. Here are the top stories for the hour. A step closer to Palestinian statehood after a UN resolution advancing peace in Gaza wins backing from the United States. US President Donald Trump confirms he will sue the BBC over a misleading edit of his speech, despite an apology from the broadcaster. And 9 people have been killed in a blast at a police station in India-administered Kashmir. The United States, along with several countries in Asia and the Middle East, have voiced support for a UN Security Council resolution aimed at advancing peace in Gaza. The resolution is seen as a historic step toward Palestinian self-determination. Meanwhile, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is planning to meet with Hamas chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya, highlighting Washington's continued involvement in efforts to resolve the conflict.
The United States, Qatar, Egypt, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Jordan and Turkey have voiced their support for a UN Security Council resolution currently under discussion, drafted by Washington in coordination with regional partners. The statement highlights that the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, announced on the 29th of September and later endorsed in Sharm el-Sheikh, is being recognized as a historic step and is formally backed by the resolution. The countries stress that the process paves the way for Palestinian self-determination and statehood, describing the initiative as a genuine effort that offers a realistic path toward peace and stability, not only between Israelis and Palestinians, but for the wider region. They also expressed hope that the resolution will be adopted swiftly. As regional backing for the proposal widens, attention has returned to earlier discussions suggesting that Indonesia, Azerbaijan and Pakistan could contribute to a future stabilization force in Gaza, an idea first reported by Politico. The talks were exploratory, but they placed the 3 countries within the wider debate over who may help secure Gaza. Once a ceasefire takes hold, reliable sources had told A News that Azerbaijan's stance remains firm, coordinating closely with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Arab League, and insisting that any role must rest on international legitimacy, a clear UN Security Council mandate, and a unified Arab position on Gaza's political and security future. Palestine welcomed this joint statement, emphasizing the importance of an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and reiterating its readiness to assume full responsibility in the territory. Meanwhile, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff plans to meet soon with Hamas chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya, according to a report published Friday. The date for the meeting has not been finalized.
Families sheltering in makeshift tents across Gaza City are now battling a new hardship. Torrential rain that has soaked through their temporary homes, destroying what little they have left. With winter fast approaching and forecasts warning of more severe weather to come, authorities say the already dire living conditions could deteriorate even further in the days ahead.
Heavy rainwater flooded makeshift tents sheltering displaced families in Gaza City, worsening already dire living conditions and leaving bedding and belongings soaked. The Gaza municipality warned that the humanitarian situation could sharply deteriorate with the onset of winter rains, citing the collapse of sewage and water networks and widespread destruction of housing infrastructure. Families affected by the downpour woke to the rain in the middle of the night and say they have nowhere to seek shelter.
When the rainfall came in, the water started pouring in on us from the street because we're in low-lying areas and the whole camp in general is a low area, all paved. The camp was negatively affected by the rainfall. How are we supposed to cope? If in just one day, 2 hours, it was only by God's mercy on us, then what will happen if a second weather depression like this comes our way?
We thank God for the rain, but we're living in tents, under tarps. Our bedding is soaked, our clothes are soaked. Everything we have is wet. From 2 a.m. and until morning, we've been standing on our feet so that we don't drown.
Vast areas of Gaza have been reduced to wasteland by Israeli bombardment during 2 years of war that Gaza health authorities say has killed around 68,000 people. The Gaza municipality also reports that 93% of tents have either collapsed or become uninhabitable. Officials warned that without immediate delivery of relief supplies, fuel and repair equipment, the fragile sanitation and water systems could fail entirely once heavy rains continue, raising the risk of flooding and disease outbreaks.
The Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebel group have signed a new framework for peace in Doha after months of Qatar-led mediation supported by the United States and the African Union. The deal comes after earlier ceasefires collapsed, with both sides accused of violations. Mediators say the new framework includes stronger monitoring to avoid another breakdown. M23, a Rwanda-backed armed group that seized major cities earlier this year, has driven one of the region's worst humanitarian crises, killing thousands and displacing hundreds of thousands. Qatar's chief negotiator called the deal historic, but said real peace depends on how it's implemented on the ground. To the Russia-Ukraine war now. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban says preparations are underway for what he calls an important peace summit in Budapest, a move that raises questions about timing, intentions and how much leverage Hungary really has in the wider conflict. The announcement lands just as Ukraine used its domestically produced Neptune missiles for the first time in an attack on Russia's key Black Sea port of Novorossiysk, a major escalation in its long-range strike capabilities and a direct hit on one of Moscow's strategic assets. Joining me now to discuss is Julia O'Connell, member of Dignitas from New York. Julia, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for an invitation.
Now, Orban says he's preparing a peace summit. How credible is this initiative? And what might Budapest be aiming to achieve diplomatically at this stage of the war?
Let's just break it down. There's two parts, two events happening. First, Ukraine hit Russian strategic port, Novorossiysk. And it's not only a strategic port, it's also a strategic artery for Russian Black Sea fleet. It's also strategic for the oil export. And Russia, gets hit and the damage is large. They're not going to disclose how big is the damage, but we know it's very significant. And it's significant, even more significant because it's done by Ukrainian-produced a far-range missile, as we know from the news. So Orban have not been a friend of Ukraine. He blocked support of European Union to Ukraine, economical support, military support, political support. So he is not, he depends on Russia, on Russian oil and Russian gas, even though the President Trump pushed for European Union not to use Russian oil and gas. His country Hungary still uses it. Mm-hmm. So when at this time, when we hear it, this proposal coming from Orban, we kind of understand that that's proposed comes from Kremlin, from Putin through Orban. Why Putin needs it at this point? There is several factors. Russian economy is really suffering right now. The numbers that just came out is that it's 0 to negative in the growth. They have problems with Fund of National Wealth that's depleting. They have problems with recruiting people for the war in Ukraine. So they do mobilization right now all through year instead of 2 times that it used to be. And most importantly, actually, that makes Putin nervous is $300 billion of frozen Russian assets that both Europe and United States came very close to allow be used for Ukraine, for supporting Ukraine. So all these kind of factors make Putin very nervous. He is using his 1,000 people a day to push in Pokrovsk area. He's bombarding Ukraine with a massive attacks. And so this is not a genuine desire to have a peace that comes through President of Hungary, Orban. It's more of a political theater where Putin is testing whether Europe has will. They have a desire to sit down and have some type of negotiation that would either buy him time or buy him time before the frozen assets will be available to Ukraine. So overall, seeing Ukrainian producing far-range missile, producing many far-range drones that hit Russian oil refineries, Russian military facilities, Russian strategic military facilities, that all kind of makes Putin wants to see if there is a sort of ceasefire could be maybe possibly reached, so he can take a break, regroup, get his economy to the point where he can continue the war.
And Yulia, how is Hungary stepping into the spotlight now likely to be received by other EU partners?
They're stepping out not because of the genuine desire or genuine proposal to bring the peace to Ukraine. Orban right now stepping out as a mouth of Russia, as the mouth of Putin. Mm-hmm. So it's not, he's controlled by Kremlin. So it's not his actual, all of a sudden desire to have that type of a peace conversation. It's more of the Kremlin testing the will of European Union to sit down and have some kind of talks, again, buying time because the Russia is going into the winter. The winter is going to be very difficult for Russia as well. The Ukraine hits a lot of electricity grid. There is a blackouts in Russia right now, so the war is on Russian basically territory happening. So it's not a time to have a genuine peace talk. It's more of the buying time and seeing what he can do, especially kind of maybe block the European Union from giving Ukraine or letting Ukraine use 300 billion of frozen assets. So it's more of a game rather than a genuine conversation.
Okay. And Ukraine's first use of Neptune missiles is significant. What does this say about the evolution of its strike capabilities and the changing dynamics in the Black Sea?
Well, the dynamic in the Black Sea has been changed for past couple years since Ukraine started using their drones in the Black Sea and was able to deter Russian fleet, not allowing Russian ships, large ships, to come close to Ukrainian land, opened the grain routes that Ukraine are using right now. So Black Sea was, it's a strategic success for Ukraine that not often comes into light. Now, Ukraine right now increased their strikes with far-ranging strikes with the far-ranging drones. Daily, Russia get hit daily. And having the developed Ukrainian missile, far-ranging missile, and not fully depend on the American far-ranging missile, that is significant. That is, if not a game changer, but breakthrough for Ukraine, definitely. With support of other far-ranging missiles that Storm Shadows that United Kingdom provides, that France supports Ukraine with intelligence, that United States still support Ukraine with. The war doesn't look it's a war of attrition. It's a war where Putin is trying to see if he can outlast Ukraine. But the table is kind of turning. It seems like Ukraine, with the funds provided, again, from the frozen Russian assets, and with the increasing its own military capabilities, the table is turning for Putin. And so, the picture looks grim for him. And that's where we stand today.
Okay, and finally, Yulia, with military escalation on one side and talk of a peace summit on the other, how do these developments shape the overall picture of where the conflict is heading?
It's definitely not ending, unfortunately. Ukraine, again, we said it many times, that in Ukrainian president said it many times, there is no one in this world who want peace more than Ukraine. Ukraine suffering, and people in Ukraine suffering every single day. Kids being killed, kids being abducted and stolen by Russia, 20,000 and more, as we know, reported. So Russia does a huge damage for Ukraine. The Ukrainian best people, young people, are definitely involved in this war daily, and then they're learning how to fight, not how to really grow their families and being with their parents at home and go to the school normal way. But the prospects of this war for Putin is really, the Russia is, as we see, it's rotten from inside. And the war on aggressive war, not on their territory, where they have soldiers who are motivated only by money, only by paying for their apartments, or paying for little as food and clothes in Russia. The prospects for Putin in this war is very clear. He will lose it. The damage he will do before it happens, it's still significant. But when it happens and how it happens, we are still to see. It's a historical moment. But there is no way that Russia can win this war. They will most likely collapse, just like Soviet Union collapsed, that they could not pull through the war in Afghanistan.
Yulia, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your insight. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Now, in other news, in Ukraine, Kyiv officials say an elderly woman injured in yesterday's Russian strike has died in hospital this morning, bringing the death toll from the attack to 7. The strike was part of what authorities described as one of the largest overnight assaults on the capital since the start of the war, with Russia launching 430 drones and 18 missiles at residential areas, energy sites and key infrastructure. More than 35 people were injured, including children and a pregnant woman. 11 apartment blocks were hit, fires broke out in several districts, and a hospital was damaged. Kyiv's mayor says the death toll may rise as rescue teams continue clearing debris. And now, staying in Ukraine, were among Russia's strikes on Kyiv on Friday, an Iskander missile hit the Azerbaijani embassy. Officials say repeated attacks like this raise questions about whether the strikes are deliberate, noting Azerbaijan had shared the locations of all its diplomatic buildings with Russia in 2022.
Russia launched one of its largest overnight attacks on Ukraine, firing around 430 drones and 18 missiles at Kyiv. At least 6 people were killed and more than 30 injured, with damage reported across most districts of the capital. Amid the strikes, an Iskander missile hit the territory of the Azerbaijani embassy in Kyiv. The explosion resulted in the complete destruction of a part of the embassy's perimeter wall. Damage to structures, service vehicles, the administrative building, and the consular section of the embassy, as well as serious damage to the diplomatic missions compound. No casualties were reported. Hours later, Azerbaijan summoned Russia's ambassador in Baku. Officials delivered a strong protest and handed over a note verbal, saying the attack was unacceptable and violated international law. They reminded the Russian side that this was not the first incident. Baku listed previous strikes on its consulate in Kharkiv in March 2022, a Kinjal missile near the embassy in January 2024, the embassy and residence in August 2025, and Sokar oil depots in Odessa in August 2025. Officials said the repeated incidents raised serious questions about whether the strikes are deliberate, noting that Azerbaijan had shared the coordinates of all its diplomatic buildings with Russia in April 2022, and Moscow had pledged to respect them. Police, Ukraine's security service, and the prosecutor's office were on site, documenting damage and clearing debris. Embassy staff and contractors worked to replace shattered glass and secure the compound. A massive crater ripped into the ground nearby, its jagged edges and surrounding debris showing the explosion's destructive power. The blast damaged more than 5 cars, leaving one heavily wrecked, while others were hit by shrapnel, lost windows, and were covered in dust with scratches across their bodies. Buildings and homes were heavily damaged, with cracked walls and shattered windows, and glass littered the streets, showing the force of the explosions. Residents reported hearing something huge before security teams inspected the area and confirmed the strike.
We got up, I guess, somewhere around 1 a.m. In the morning, and because we heard explosion nearby, and then suddenly we heard a huge explosion out of our window, and our windows broke and just fold on us.
I thought that gonna be glass, so I tried to cover the baby just to save him from the glass.
The United Nations condemned the overnight strikes, noting deaths in Kyiv and Chornomorsk and damage to the Azerbaijani embassy. It said attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure are unacceptable and called for a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire as a first step toward lasting peace in Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky called Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev to condemn the embassy strike and thank Azerbaijan for its humanitarian support. President Aliyev said attacks on diplomatic missions cannot be justified. Across Kyiv, emergency crews say more than 40 people were rescued as fires and destruction were reported citywide.
Donald Trump said that he intends to sue the BBC next week for up to $5 billion, claiming the broadcaster wrongly edited a clip of one of his speeches. The BBC has apologised and admitted the edit was a mistake and says it will not broadcast the documentary again, yet it maintains that Trump has no grounds for a defamation case.
Well, we'll sue them. We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week. See, well, I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated. I mean, not that they couldn't have not done that. They cheated. They changed the words coming out of my mouth.
On global tariffs, Switzerland scores a win. The US will sharply cut tariffs on Swiss goods, protecting the economy and supporting exporters. In return, Swiss firms will invest in American pharmaceuticals, chemicals, gold and semiconductors.
The United States will cut tariffs on Swiss goods from 39% to 15% under a new trade deal that Swiss economists say removes a major threat to the country's economy and offers a clear boost to industry. In exchange, Switzerland will pour $200 billion into the US by 2028, with investments stretching across pharmaceutical products, certain chemicals, gold and semiconductors. Speaking about tariffs talks with Switzerland, US President highlighted ongoing efforts to address trade issues.
We hit Switzerland very hard. We want Switzerland to remain successful, and we're a part of Switzerland in the sense that they've been a very good ally. We're working on them and some others, and we're working on others to increase them a little bit too.
US Trade Representative Jameson Greer said the agreement tears down long-standing barriers and opens new opportunities for American exporters. Switzerland's Economy Minister Guy Parmelin said in a press conference nearly all issues had been resolved. though full details would be shared once everything is finally clear.
This represents an important step for our exporting companies and for the stability of our trade relations. First, the United States has agreed to reduce the level of additional tariffs. For Switzerland, these tariffs will now be capped at 15%, which, as I have said, puts us on an equal footing with the European Union.
Swiss industry groups, who reported sharp falls in exports this year, say the deal should help stabilize growth and safeguard jobs. A Swiss government statement said the agreement will also reduce Swiss import duties on selected US agricultural and industrial goods, including fish, seafood and non-sensitive farm products. Moreover, the deal will further open Switzerland's market, granting duty-free quotas for US beef, bison and poultry, while lowering duties on additional industrial goods. Both sides aim to finalize the wider trade framework by early 2026, marking a significant step in strengthening ties after months of strained negotiations.
A fire at an industrial complex on the outskirts of Buenos Aires triggered a powerful explosion, injuring more than 20 people. The blast occurred at 3 buildings storing agrochemical products. Fire crews are working to bring the blaze under control. The cause of the fire has yet to be determined, and only minor injuries have been reported in nearby homes. Spanish Coast Guard teams rescued 57 migrants from a wooden boat near Gran Canaria. Rescue units also recovered another 377 people from 2 vessels near El Hierro in the Canary Islands. Arrivals to the Canary Islands have dropped by nearly half this year, officials say, after record numbers in 2024. But the Atlantic crossing remains one of the world's most dangerous migration routes, with rough seas and fragile boats putting lives at risk. Looking ahead, EU officials plan to provide extra support to frontline countries once the bloc's new migration and asylum pact comes into effect next year. Chileans vote on Sunday in their first compulsory election since 2012. Alongside choosing a new president, they'll also renew much of Congress, a result that could shift the country's political direction. The race is split between a left-wing frontrunner and several right-wing and libertarian challengers. With no clear majority expected, a runoff in December looks likely.
Chileans are heading to the polls on Sunday for a presidential election, marking the first mandatory vote since 2012. Around 15 to 16 million citizens are eligible to vote, including a large number of first-time and younger voters. Citizens who fail to vote without a valid excuse face fines. The presidential election comes alongside a full renewal of the 155-member lower house of Congress and 23 of the 50 Senate seats. The outcome could reshape Chile's legislative balance and influence future constitutional reforms. The presidential race pits the governing leftist coalition against a field of right-wing and libertarian candidates. Leading the polls is Jeanette Jara of the Communist Party, representing the leftist coalition. Her campaign focuses on labor rights, security, and expanding Chile's lithium and copper industries. Right-wing candidates include José Antonio Cast, a former 3-time presidential contender, emphasizing immigration controls and security. Johannes Kaiser, a libertarian candidate advocating border closures, state spending cuts, and leaving the Paris Agreement. And Evelyn Matei, a moderate conservative and former Labour minister with a focus on economic and security issues. Crime and immigration have emerged as key voter concerns in the campaign. Analysts note that younger voters are seen as unpredictable, less ideological, and more focused on practical issues. The election follows a history of low voter turnout in Chile. In the first round of the 2021 presidential election, the abstention rate was 53%. The mandatory vote is intended to increase participation, particularly among younger generations. Experts suggest that no candidate is expected to secure an outright majority, which is likely to trigger a runoff on the 14th of December. The legislative vote could also reshape Chile's Congress. If right-wing candidates win the presidency and secure majorities in both chambers, it would mark the first time since the end of the Pinochet's rule in 1990 that the right controls the executive and legislative branches, potentially enabling significant policy or constitutional changes.
To Brazil's Belém now, where during the COP30 summit, Azerbaijan presented its latest urban and climate priorities, building on initiatives launched at COP29 in Baku. The key update was the Baku Sustainability Coalition, now moving into a formal operational phase. Anar Guliev spoke to A News on the sidelines of the summit.
At COP29 in Baku, we launched the Multi-Level Action Pathway Initiative, which led to the creation of the Baku Sustainability Coalition, together with Egypt, the UAE and Brazil. Here at COP30, we are holding its first institutional meeting. The Coalition's charter has been submitted to member states, and we will now open it to all countries that have hosted COP or the World Urban Forum.
At least 9 people have been killed after confiscated explosives accidentally detonated inside a police station in Indian-administered Kashmir. Nearly 30 others were injured, most of them police officers and forensic staff who were examining the material.
At least 9 people have been killed and nearly 30 others injured after a stockpile of confiscated explosives accidentally detonated inside a police station in Nogam, in Indian-administered Kashmir. Police say the blast happened late on Friday night, while forensic teams were examining the seized material. Most of the victims were police officers and specialists working inside the compound. Several of the injured remain in critical condition.
There was an explosion and we got scared. When we reached, we saw everything devastated. A lot of smoke, dead bodies and displaced body parts. May God save them all.
Officials say the explosion tore through the building, setting parts of the station on fire and forcing emergency teams to evacuate the wounded to nearby hospitals.
In this unfortunate incident, 9 people have lost their lives, 27 police personnel, 2 revenue officials and 3 civilians from the adjacent areas have received injuries. The sampling process, the handling was being done with extreme caution, with utmost caution by the FSL team. However, unfortunately, during this course, last night around 11:20 p.m., an accidental explosion has taken place. Any other speculation into the cause of this incident is unnecessary.
The blast comes just days after a deadly car explosion in New Delhi killed 8 people, heightening concerns about safety and security across India. Authorities in Kashmir say an investigation into how the explosives ignited is now underway.
At the Azerbaijan-Iran border, Astara customs authorities have intercepted a large shipment of heroin destined for Europe. The drugs, concealed in a consignment labelled as tile adhesive, weighed approximately 456.8 kilograms. Officials say the seizure has removed over $90 million worth of narcotics from illegal circulation.
At the Azerbaijan-Iran border, authorities at Astara Customs have seized a large shipment of heroin bound for Europe, removing the drugs from illegal circulation. The consignment, labelled as tile adhesive and transported via Azerbaijan from Iran to Estonia, was stopped at the Astara railway customs post and inspected using a stationary X-ray scanner. Suspicious markings prompted a thorough examination with the assistance of a sniffer dog. During the check, 44 out of 3,250 bags were found to contain heroin, with a total estimated weight of approximately 456.8 kilograms. The street value of the seized drugs in Europe is reported to exceed 90 million US dollars. Investigations into the case are ongoing.
Central Asian leaders have gathered in Tashkent for their annual consultative summit. This year's meeting focuses on expanding trade and boosting regional connectivity. Our Andy Mioch has more on the topic.
Hello from Tashkent. The Uzbek capital is all set to host the 7th consultative meeting of Central Asian leaders, with Azerbaijan as the guest of honor for the 3rd year in a row. The leaders are gathering for the weekend summit with plans to adopt a package of multilateral agreements to further deepen regional cooperation. Now, that cooperation has already yielded results. The long-standing dispute over borders in Central Asia was resolved. There were several agreements reached regarding managing of water resources. And then, of course, there's the trade. According to data of the host of the summit, the trade within the region has doubled in the span of 7 years, reaching some $11 billion in 2024. Now, the plan is to double that. This was discussed by investment and trade officials of the Central Asian Five and Azerbaijan here in Tashkent ahead of the summit. When it comes to global trade, trade routes along the broader region play a great role. The middle corridor connecting China to Europe and vice versa via Central Asia and the South Caucasus is a prime example of rapid growth. In 2024 alone, volumes of cargo transported along the route were increased by more than 60% when compared to the year before that, and have reached 4.5 million tons. Now, back to the gathering itself, the leaders are also expected to discuss some other issues regarding migration, energy supplies, and regional security. Ahead of the summit, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev spoke to the Uzbek press, saying that the meeting will be a stage for fostering centuries-old friendship between brotherly peoples. From Tashkent for A News, Andy Mioch.
Energy ministers from Azerbaijan, Georgia, Hungary and Romania met in Tbilisi to discuss the Caspian, Black Sea, Europe Green Energy Corridor. They said the detailed study needed to move the plan forward will be finished by early 2026. The project has also been added to a key European network plan, an important step that could help it receive official EU support. The ministers also agreed to connect this project with a separate plan to lay a long electricity cable under the Black Sea, and said the next stage will focus on preparing for investment and construction. After more than 4 decades of searching, archaeologists have uncovered a long-lost temple of Zeus in southwestern Turkey. The discovery sheds new light on the ancient city of Limria.
Archaeologists have found the Temple of Zeus in Limira, located in Antalya along the Turkish Riviera. Excavations have been ongoing since 1982, and the site had remained hidden despite historical records confirming it. The temple's front facade measures 15 metres wide, and a sacred chamber lies beneath an orange grove outside the ancient city wall. Ceramics recovered at the site suggest the city dates back 5,000 years. Researchers say the monumental gate known as the Propylon, previously identified under the Roman street, once led to the temple's sacred area. The discovery is prompting experts to reconsider earlier ideas about the layout of Limira. Excavations will continue after expropriation work, as archaeologists hope to uncover more of the classical era site.
And these were your updates for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.